Hey, welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Row. So tonight we're going to be diving into the world of Stagg JR. Now in front of me I have three different batches of Stagg. I have Stagg 14, 15, and 16. Now those are considered different batches, so it's batch 14, 15, and 16. The batches are not actually on the bottle. The only way to distinguish which batch a Stagg JR is on the proof. So this one is a 130.2 proof. This one in batch 15 is a 131.1 proof, and batch 16 is 130.9 proof. So right there, there's no other indication of which batch it came from, and so everybody really uses the proof as a guide. Now, Stagg JR is released by the Buffalo Trace Distillery. They usually release them about twice a year and usually in alternating seasons. When Stagg JR first came out, it was fairly easy to find compared to what we have now, where it's almost impossible to find. Now here in the state of Virginia, we can get Stagg at retail for about $65, $70 because we're a price-controlled, ABC-controlled state. However, most people outside of Virginia or North Carolina or other states that have ABC-regulated pricing, the pricing can get very, very high on the secondary market. Now, that can become price prohibitive for many, many people, and the demand for it, regardless of price, is still amazing. Here, even though we can get it cheap, it ends up being something that we have to hunt and chase for and camp out for. This Stagg 15 that I have, I camped out for about 3 hours for, and I got to the store at about 9 a.m. with a 12 a.m. opening. I had to wait about 3 hours. And even then, I felt very, very lucky to get it that day. Similar experience with the Stagg 16 here, that I ended up having to camp out for quite a while. I tried multiple days at multiple stores, and as bourbon continues to become more and more popular, the difficulty in finding some of these rare and allocated bottles continues to become more and more difficult. Now this bottle, the Stagg 14, was actually kind of easy to find. I didn't have to camp out for this at all. I really didn't have to do a whole lot other than drive over to someone's house. So this actually belongs to Papa Joe. Now when I first got into bourbon, Stagg JR was one of those brands that I always wanted to get bottles of, and it took me forever before I finally got my first bottle. And even then, I still try to drink it sparingly, even though this bottle's mostly gone and I only have one left. So tonight, as we dive into the world of Stagg, we're going to try to find out what is the best version of Stagg that I have. Is it 14, 15, or 16? Now, some of the legendary releases of Stagg are Stagg 9 and 12 and 14. Never had a 9, never had a 12. I'm about to have my first Stagg 14. Now, when I first got batch 15 as my first foray into Stagg JR, I was extremely excited to get it, open it up, and try it. When I opened it up and I tried it, I was blown away. It was a really, really good pour. Now, over time, this bottle has opened up into this very, very fruity, delicious bottle, very fruit forward, a lot of red fruit and cherries. However, as I've gotten into other bourbons that are also barrel proof, high quality stuff, I find that this Stagg, the Stagg 15, is actually a little hollow, a little thin. Now this batch 15 has been open since pretty much the day it was released, or at least the day I bought it when it first came to Virginia last winter. Now this has been open, this batch 16 has been open for about a week and a half. I opened it during a live stream not too long ago and had a pour with folks on the live stream. It was really, really enjoyable. And I kind of did these in a little bit of a side-by-side. However, I didn't have the 14, so now I want to do a 14 in a proper video because I get a lot more people that watch the regular videos and join us on our live streams. But if you ever want to interact with me on a live stream and come participate in this community that we have here on Whiskey Row, the live stream's a great way to do it. So definitely check out the live streams. So even though this Stagg JR Batch 14 is the oldest bottle on the table, Joe didn't actually open this until about a week and a half ago when we were actually on the live stream. I think he opened this up on the live stream when we were tasting the 15s and the 16s so that he could, do a three-way side-by-side with the batch 14s, 15, and 16 that he had at his house. So it's actually fairly newly open as well. So these have been open almost exactly the same amount of time. All right, we've got everything poured into Glencairns. Now, just visually looking at them, you can't really see a difference in color. Well, we're going to get these bottles out of the way here in just a second, and we're going to dive into a three-way blind, just like a classic one. Unfortunately, Jamie's not here to mix up the bottles, so I'm going to have to do it myself. I'm going to have to get my hands dirty and do a little bit of the work myself. So as I nose these, I can tell some differences between the different glasses. So there is a difference on the nose that I'm picking up. This one to me has a little bit more ethanol. It has a little bit more caramel. This one has a little bit less ethanol, but more ethanol than this one. And it has a good caramel as well, and a little bit of a kind of a light barrel char. And then this one, much less ethanol, a little bit more of a dark caramel. On the nose, there's a few little bit of difference there, but it's not very strong. Let's give these a taste. So before I started filming, I actually poured a Glencairn of John J. Bowman, which is a Virginia distillery not far from me, but they are actually owned by Sazerac and use Buffalo Trace Mash Bill 1 juice in their products. And I figured with this being Mash Bill 1, it might be a good primer to warm me up, because diving straight into a 130 proof Stagg can be a little bit rough. So having a little bit of a 100 proof John J. Bowman Mash Bill 1 kind of primed me a little bit. That was at least a thought. And the John J. Bowman is actually a really pretty solid product. It's grown on me a lot, especially as I've gotten more and more into Buffalo Trace and enjoy their products a lot more. This John J. Bowman that I have is really kind of a blend in flavors between an Eagle Rare and a Stagg to me. At least this particular bottle. Now let's just jump right into this one. So a good proof on my tongue, some pepper, kind of a really strong cherry. Ooh, that black pepper is really kicking in now in the mid palate. The finish is definitely going towards a little bit of an herbal note. There's an underlying light caramel sweetness. I wouldn't call it a dark caramel or a dense caramel. It's just kind of a very faint sweetness, but it's solid, it's there. All right, rinsed out my palate. Now let's try the second one. Woo! Now this one has a much more clove presence on the palate at first. There's a good sweetness all through it. I mean, there's a good light caramel sweetness just like the other one. But this one has a lot more black pepper to me than the first one did. The mid palate, there's black pepper, there's clove. There's hints of barrel char on this one, which I didn't get on the first one. It's got a decently long finish, a really good mouth coat. It has a better mouth coat than the first one. All right, rinsed out my palate. Let's try this third one. Now this one has a stronger caramel note to me on the nose and a little bit less proof. Now on the palate, this has a very strong kind of drying presence. Really just kind of dries my mouth out. It has a good, to me it's even less caramel than the first two. It's got a really kind of a fruit forward presence. Hints of clove, hints of black pepper. Not as strong a black pepper as the other two. It's a little bit more dialed back in that way. The finish is a little bit shorter and less impressive. These two are much more similar. So I'm guessing 14 and 16, and I don't know which is which, I have no clue. But I'm guessing that this is batch 15 because that's the one I'm most familiar with. And the fact that it faded out so quickly compared to these two, it kind of clued me into that. But we'll see. I could be wrong. Now I just cleaned my palate out. We're going to go back the other way now. Yeah, this has a really nice red berry. Traditionally, Stagg Jr. is kind of a cherry. Tends to go like a cherry note. This one to me is more raspberry. It has a really good mouthfeel at first, and then it kind of goes thin, and then it just fades away. When it fades away, though, it's got this very kind of pleasant, sweet, fruity caramel thing that it does as it fades. Let's try this this one here. Yeah, this one has a much stronger clove presence. The black pepper, I'm getting black pepper in my mid palate. I'm getting black pepper on the tip of my tongue. As it goes down, I'm noticing it does have a little bit of that drying effect, but it's not as pronounced as it was in this one here. But this one has a better mouthfeel to me than this one. It's got a really good coat. It's really pretty solid. Has a little bit of a kind of a very dark cherry with caramel. There's clove. And it really, there's this flavor that's right between cherry and clove, and I can't put my finger on it. Yeah, the mouth coat on this one is really good. It's got this nice pepperiness. That's a very quality bourbon too. It is really tough. The finish on these two, this one and this one, the finish on them are very similar in quality, duration, in everything. This one over here definitely comes across a little thinner, a little lighter, and doesn't seem quite as impressive to me as these two. All right, after going back and forth between these two, I can easily say that this one is number 3. It's good. By all means, it's very good. However, it's not as complex. It's not as deep and rich in flavor. To me, it has this traditional Stagg, caramel, proof, age, and this delicious red berryness, but then it just fades so quickly. So this is in third place for that reason. As I start to nitpick, I'm like, the finish on this one is just a little bit, well, it's a little thinner than I would expect from 131 proof bourbon that's uncut, unfiltered. It just doesn't drink like what you would expect. This one is, so that's why it's in third place. This one has a little bit of a cloveness, and maybe that'll fade in time if this is the one of the either the 14 or the 16. Hope that might fade in time a little bit and blend a little bit better, because again, the flavor that I'm getting off of this one, if it's batch 15, is different than when it first opened the bottle. So maybe these will change as well over time. But I'm gonna have to go for number 2. I'm gonna have to go with this one. And then for number 1, I'm gonna have to go with this one. These two were exceptionally close between 1 and 2. At first, actually, I liked this one a little bit better. But then as I kept sipping into it, I went toward this one because the clove on this one started to become more and more kind of just stuck out to me just a little bit. With this one, it was kind of more well-rounded, a little bit better balanced across all the different flavor dials. Which is which? Again, this one I think is 15. These are 14 and 16, but I don't know which is which. So let's get the bottles down and figure it out. So this is 14, this is 15, and this is 16. 14 is really easy to remember because, well, it's the one that I've drunk a bunch of and it's almost empty. The 14 and the 16, I have to actually look at the proofs each time so I don't get them backwards, and I keep getting them sideways, especially now that I've drunken a couple of good sips out of each of these Glencairns. It's becoming more and more difficult. So let's dive right into number 3. Number 3 is number 15. I called that one. Yeah, it's just a little bit different for a Stagg, at least from the 3 expressions, the 3 batches of Stagg that I've had. This one just kind of stands out as a little bit different. Number 2 is 16. So this is batch 16, so this is the latest release, and that would be 14 then. So our outcome is that batch 14 is the best of the 3 Staggs that I have a hold of, or at least that I've tried. This isn't my bottle. I have to return it to Joe. I promised him that I wouldn't do too much damage to the bottle before I returned it. The 16, this is mine that I just opened. I'm hoping that in time, that cloveness that was kind of very, very palate forward to me will kind of dial back a little bit, and that this will kind of mature into a very, very good sipping, high proof, uncut, unfiltered Stagg Jr. This batch 15 was a very, very solid bottle. However, as it's aged, it's kind of changed to me a little bit. The finish has gotten shorter, and I don't know what the oxidation process in the bottle, I don't know how that's playing into this particular bottle. But to me, this has gotten less interesting over time, and as I've put it up against other higher proof barrel strength bourbons, it fares worse and worse each time that I do it. And I really just need to kind of finish this one off and call it good. So which bottle of Stagg Jr. should you hunt for? Whichever one you can find. So obviously the 16 is going to be the most readily available because it's out right now and it's still hitting the markets in some places. So if you can get your hands on one, by all means snag one up. If you can get your hands on an older one, whatever they are, snag it. If you've never had one, grab one. If you're presented with the 14, 15, and 16 at this unicorn store at the same price and you have to pick, go with the 14. It's probably a little bit better than the other two. However, if you've never had a Stagg, grab whichever one you can, as long as you're not having to spend too much for it, reach too far for it. Well, this video has been a lot of fun to shoot tonight, to try these 3 different batches from Stagg Jr., to find out that the batch 14 beats out the batch 16 and the batch 15. Joe, thank you so much for letting me borrow batch 14. That means a lot. Thank you so much for the Patreons who are supporting the channel. Double thumbs up to you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you to all who go out to whiskeyrow.shop and buy our merchandise. Thank you to all of you for watching this video. And until next time, find a bottle you love.